Bertha Patterson had always reveled in her reputation as the sweetest grandma on Maple Leaf Drive. She displayed porcelain dolls on her shelves and crocheted scarves and pastel shades to hand out to unsuspecting passers-by. Her home smelled perpetually of cinnamon bread and tangy lemon meringue, supporting the claim that her baking was simply unparalleled. At least, that's what everyone believed. Until the annual bake-off came around, Bertha's beloved granddaughter, Emma, would insist with genuine pride that Grandma's bread pudding was the fluffiest in the neighborhood, that her apple pies were crowned with the most buttery streusel, and that no other neighbor could rival the decadent chocolate swirl cake she produced at the drop of a hat. But Bertha, smile hidden beneath her reading glasses, knew better than to underestimate her opponents. She wasn't in it just to be admired, she wanted the top prize, and if standing on top of the metaphorical culinary mountain required questionable moves, well, so be it. This year, the neighborhood bake-off was receiving more attention than ever before. The rumors were that the winner wouldn't just get the standard gold-colored plastic trophy, but also a feature in the town's weekly newsletter and a gift certificate to the fanciest new gourmet baking supply store. The rumors spread, and soon, Maple Leaf Drive's best bakers were dusting off their recipes, testing new methods, and eyeing each other like hawks. Competition was in the air. You could smell the sugar and rivalry from several blocks away. Bertha was determined to secure first place this time. She'd come second the previous year to a newcomer named Gloria Brown, who'd wowed the crowd with a triple-layered carrot cake iced with an impossibly smooth cream cheese frosting. She was gracious in public, pretending to congratulate Gloria, but the moment she stepped back into her house, Bertha quietly swore it would never happen again. Her trophy shelf had a glaring gap that needed to be corrected, and she relished the chance to fill it. The official announcement for the bake-off arrived in the mail. Bertha ripped open the envelope like it was a precious family heirloom. She read the date and the time, nodding to herself at each line of text. Having memorized every rule from the previous years, she was sure nothing much had changed. Only one dessert entry per contestant, judging criteria based on taste, presentation, and originality, and a vow to keep the environment fair and honest. Fair and honest, she muttered, tapping her foot against the kitchen tile. If they think I'm not serious, they've got another thing coming. Over the next several days, Bertha dedicated herself to practicing her best recipes. She tried and retried her strawberry tarts until her kitchen counter was hidden under pink-stained baking sheets. She perfected her piping technique for buttercream roses, bleaching her favorite apron white again and again after near disasters with food coloring. Sugar dust floated in the air like a sweet cloud, coating the cupboards and making the entire home smell like a bakery. Emma, visiting after school, would giggle at the sight of her grandma in a flower-covered bathrobe, diligently flipping through old recipe cards like they were sacred texts. Yet Bertha's competitive instincts went beyond the usual desire to hone her craft. She called the local supermarket to find out the exact days the produce aisle received fresh berries, so she could gauge whether any of her rivals would try to get the best strawberries when they were at their juiciest. She joined a community Facebook group and peeked at the statuses posted by other bakers, particularly Harriet Watson, the renowned bread artisan, and Nancy Bloom, infamous for her whimsical cupcakes. In each post about experiments in the kitchen, Bertha sensed a threat or a clue. The bake-off eventually drew near. In the final week, tension ramped up. Decorated posters sprang up on every telephone pole, reminding everyone of the big day. Kids raced around front yards in their spare time, arms sticky from sampling leftover frostings. Overly enthusiastic husbands offered to taste everything, stepping into precarious sugar comas in the process. Everywhere Bertha turned, she heard teasing hints. Wait till you taste Harriet's sourdough brownies, or Nancy is going all out with a secret ganache. She politely nodded along, but in her mind she was already imagining ways to upstage them. Emma was a little concerned by Grandma's determination. She watched from the corner of the kitchen one afternoon as Bertha checked her oven thermometer 9 times in a row. "Grandma, you really want to win this year, huh?" Emma asked with a tentative laugh, plucking a sugared blueberry from a nearby bowl. "Oh, sweet pea, you have no idea," Bertha answered, her voice brimming with us against the world intensity. I've come too far just to dodge the competition now. Besides, they're all cheaters. I just know it. Grandma, Emma chastised gently. They're just normal people who like to bake. And it's supposed to be fun. Fun, Bertha mumbled under her breath. Sure, sure. No force on earth could convince her that Harriet or Nancy wouldn't stoop to sabotage. After all, they probably had their eyes on the same crown. And so, as the day of the bake-off inched closer, Bertha's behavior took a puzzling turn. She decided to hold a friendly get-together the night before the big event. Under the guise of generosity, she invited Harriet, Nancy, and even that formidable baker from last year, Gloria Brown, to sample tea in her living room. We'll share tips, exchange recipes, have a good time, she insisted through her phone calls. Her guest found it slightly odd, but Grandma P was known for her sweet exterior. They had no reason to decline. And so, just after sunset, three very competitive neighbors trotted up her porch steps, each wearing a polite, anticipatory smile. Bertha poured them her standard black tea scented with a slight whiff of cloves. Plates of cookies sat on doilies, and she kept a candy bowl stocked on the coffee table. The chat began mildly enough: weather, gossip about the newly opened flower shop, pleasantries about the upcoming bake-off. Nancy gushed about her new stand mixer. Harriet bragged about her custom bread baking stone. Gloria humbly mentioned she'd studied baking techniques from her grandmother's old diary. They seemed genuinely eager to talk shop, but Bertha's eyes wandered conspiratorially. So, Harriet, Bertha said casually, what are you baking for tomorrow? Harriet, sipping her tea, paused. Well, she began, I was thinking about a spiced chocolate bread pudding with salted caramel sauce. Something that's not too sweet but real deep with flavor. She smiled as if imagining her victory. Bertha's heart panged at the notion that Harriet would soon outshine her once again. Turning to Nancy, Bertha tried to push the same question. Nancy put on a wary expression but answered, cupcakes, but not just any cupcakes. They're filled with a toasted almond mousse and topped with a swirl of hazelnut buttercream. Nancy grinned, expecting gasps of admiration. Bertha, her eyebrows raised, forced a polite nod, but Gloria, the reigning champion, was the biggest mystery. She only took a small sip of tea and said, I'd rather keep it a surprise. You'll see tomorrow. Bertha tried not to let her frustration show as she poured more tea for her guests. She feigned interest in Harriet's bread-making techniques, but mostly waited for a chance to slip away from the conversation. Eventually, Harriet excused herself to the bathroom. Nancy wandered off toward the kitchen in search of water, and Gloria ambled along to examine a framed family photo. Bertha seized the moment. She dashed into the kitchen and rummaged through Harriet's open purse, feeling a pang of guilt but pressing on anyway. She carefully unscrewed a small container Harriet carried, which was labeled Signature Spice Blend. With calculated mischief, Bertha replaced half of the mixture with an equal measure of salt that she grabbed from her cabinet. If Harriet tried to use her spice blend in the competition, her dessert would taste like a salty train wreck. As Bertha screwed the lid back on, her hand trembled with an odd mixture of excitement and anxiety. Was it right to sabotage the competition? Probably not. But the memory of that second-place finish last year overcame her hesitation. No more nice grandma, she told herself. This year, she was unstoppable. Back in the living room, she found Nancy hovering thoughtfully near the candy bowl. Bertha narrowed her eyes. Was Nancy snooping? But then Nancy just sighed and admitted, These candies are so good, Bertha. Did you make them yourself? Oh dear, no, Bertha lied. I just got them from the store. Actually, she'd made them using a recipe from her mother's time, but she wasn't about to relinquish the possibility that Nancy was fishing for secrets. Eventually, the visitors finished their tea and strolled out the door. Harriet and Nancy thanked Bertha for her hospitality. Gloria waved politely, her expression unreadable. As soon as Bertha heard the sound of footsteps retreating from her porch, she locked her door and let out a squeal of excitement. She rushed to the kitchen, triple-checked her sabotage plan, and giggled quietly. If Harriet used that spice blend, it would be a total meltdown. Step 1, done. Step 2 would come tomorrow. Early the next morning, the day of the bake-off, Bertha woke up before sunrise. She had her ingredients laid out precisely. Flour sifted 3 times, sugar measured to the exact gram, fresh herbs from her prized garden, and a special jam made from her own orchard's berries. She was going for something show-stopping, something so original and mouth-watering that the judges wouldn't have any choice but to name her Queen of Maple Leaf Drive's baking world. She had settled on a rosemary-infused lemon cake with layers of blackberry jam and a light cream cheese frosting. Over the last 2 weeks, she'd perfected it to the point of obsession. She could recite the recipe in her sleep. As she began to mix the batter, Emma ambled into the kitchen, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "You're up early, Grandma," she yawned. She blinked at the chaos of bowls, spoons, and measuring cups strewn around. "Can I help?" Bertha eventually agreed to let Emma whisk the frosting. With a wild glint in her eyes, the older woman poured the cake batter into pans, tapping them on the counter to eliminate air bubbles, then slid them into the oven with ceremonial seriousness. "That's it, Sugar Plum. Now we pray." While the cake was baking, Bertha took a brief pause to watch her neighbors through her lace curtains. She saw Harriet lugging a large bag of flour into her car's trunk, presumably for final touches. She noticed Nancy balancing a plastic container stacked with cupcakes, placing them ever so carefully so as not to tip. And there, of course, was Gloria, lifting a domed cake carrier. Bertha tried to see if there were any hints of color beneath that plastic, but Gloria had kept her masterpiece hidden with layers of foil. Bertha gritted her teeth in envy, but only for a second. She still believed she had the upper hand. The sun rose higher, and soon it was time to pack up her own glorious lemon cake. She'd let it cool, frosted the layers into perfect tiers, and decorated the top with fresh rosemary sprigs and delicate blackberries. It was a showpiece worthy of a magazine cover. The entire house smelled bright and citrusy, enough to make your mouth water. Bertha carefully placed it in a giant box, folding the flaps gently so nothing would mar the frosting. The bake-off was held in the community center, a bright hall dotted with round tables showcasing each contestant's best dessert. Folding chairs circled a small stage where the judges would sit. Already a crowd was gathering to sample the free treats once judging concluded. Children zipped around, trying to get glimpses of the sweet mountains on display. Husbands parked themselves in corners with watery coffee, trying to act supportive while discreetly strategizing how to taste everything, without paying for dinner later. Bertha spotted Harriet's table. Sure enough, Harriet had a platter of what looked like chocolate bread pudding, freshly dusted with cocoa powder, topped with a drizzle of caramel. Harriet offered Bertha a tight smile from across the room. Her knuckles were white around a wooden spoon. Bertha tried not to grin too triumphantly, hoping that Harriet had indeed tossed her own signature spice blend into that pudding. Then she glimpsed Nancy fussing over a tower of gourmet cupcakes, each topped with a swirl of sumptuous hazelnut buttercream. Over at Gloria's table sat an exquisite multi-tier creation that glistened under the overhead lighting. A cluster of sugar flowers perched on top, each petal perfect. Bertha's heart skipped a beat. Gloria had once again gone all out. Sucking in a breath, Bertha lifted her lemon cake from its carrier and gingerly placed it on the table. The bright swirl of cream cheese frosting, the garnish of blackberries, and the fresh sprigs of rosemary popped in the ambient light, drawing more than a few murmurs of approval from onlookers. Emma beamed proudly at her grandma, bouncing on her toes. Bertha felt a flush of satisfaction. Yes, she might just pull this off. Then came the moment for the official tasting. 3 judges, a local pastry chef, a well-known teacher from the high school, and last year's biggest sponsor for the community garden, gathered at Harriet's table first. They took their time, carefully slicing through the bread pudding. The first judge's eyes immediately widened. Bertha swallowed a laugh. Harriet's face stiffened, but she smiled tensely, waiting for feedback. "That's salty," one judge coughed. "Oh," Harriet blurted, "did I overdo it?" She placed one hand over her mouth, mortified. Bertha watched as Harriet's polite grin faded away. replaced by a desperate suggestion. Try the sauce! But the sauce wasn't enough to hide the shocking saltiness embedded in the dessert. Harriet's attempt was clearly compromised, and Bertha relished the small victory, though she wore her best neutral expression for the sake of appearances. Next, the judges moved on to Nancy's cupcakes. The swirl of hazelnut buttercream glistened under the fluorescent lights. They took a bite. Immediately, all three nodded in delight. Murmurs of, "Now that's a cupcake," and "beautiful flavor combination," reached Bertha's ear. She tightened her grip on the edge of her table. Nancy shot her a triumphant look, as if crowning herself the new queen. Bertha clenched her teeth, huffing quietly. She still believed in her own cake enough to outshine any cupcake. Tower, she just needed the judges to love it more. When the judges arrived at Gloria's table, Bertha's chest seized up with tension. Gloria removed the dome and revealed a masterpiece, a midnight chocolate cake layered with silky vanilla bean buttercream, each tier airbrushed in subtle ombre from dark cocoa to pearly white. Edible gold flakes danced upon sculpted chocolate leaves. It looked like something out of a professional pastry magazine. Bertha started to sweat. Gloria effortlessly sliced a wedge for each judge, the inside revealing a swirl of raspberries couched between layers of dark fudge. The judges looked impressed before even tasting, but the moment they had a bite, they practically rolled their eyes back in a show of dramatic gastronomic ecstasy. Bertha's heart hammered. Could she beat that? Sure, Salt Sabotage had taken Harriet out, but Nancy was still strong, and Gloria was downright threatening. Unable to help herself, she leaned closer, trying to catch any sign of dissatisfaction on the judges' faces. None appeared. Worry squirmed in her stomach, but she steeled herself as the panel approached her table. The pastry chef introduced himself politely, though Bertha already knew him from last year. "So," he said, "what have we here?" Bertha smiled. "A rosemary-infused lemon cake, layered with blackberry jam and topped with cream cheese frosting, all homemade with fresh ingredients from my garden," she proclaimed in her sweetest grandma voice. The judge nodded, slicing a neat portion to share among the three. Bertha nearly stopped breathing. They took one bite. Her heart soared as she watched their faces register the bright pop of lemon, the aromatic hint of rosemary, the sweet tang of caramelized blackberries balanced against the creamy frosting. One judge exclaimed, "Oh, that's delightful!" Another, nodding, said, "Truly unique flavor, so refreshing." The pastry chef let out a satisfied sigh. Emma squeezed Grandma's arm in excitement. Maybe Nancy's cupcakes and Gloria's regal tort were threatened after all. Once all competitors had been tasted, the judges stepped onto the small stage and deliberated in hushed voices. The crowd pressed in, hush falling as friends and family gathered for the final announcement. Bertha peered at Harriet, whose face reflected the despair of a clearly botched dessert. Nancy looked anxiously optimistic, tapping the toe of her shoe in impatient bursts, while Gloria gazed ahead with calm confidence. The teacher judge took the microphone. "We'd like to thank everyone for participating in this year's Maple Leaf Drive Bake-Off. Every dessert was lovely in its own way. While it was a close call, we do have our top three." She paused, letting the tension build. Taking third place, Harriet Watson's spiced chocolate bread pudding. Polite applause followed. Despite Harriet's dessert tasting more like a salt lick, Maple Leaf Drive's tradition was to find a way to reward loyalty, though hushes of sympathy circulated. As Harriet forced a small bow, Bertha had to restrain herself from cackling outright. The teacher judge pressed on. In second place, with a whimsical take on hazelnut cream-filled cupcakes, Nancy Bloom. The crowd erupted in cheers, especially from the younger folks who'd been enthralled by the cupcake tower. Now came the truly nail-biting moment. Bertha fidgeted, glancing at her masterpiece. Could it beat Gloria's? The judge cleared her throat with a tiny grin. "And the winner of this year's Maple Leaf Drive Bake-Off is..." She drew out the moment, scanning the crowd. "Gloria Brown's chocolate ripple cake with raspberries and vanilla bean frosting. Congratulations." Bertha felt as if the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She tried to mask her devastation with a polite clap, but inside a swirl of shock and fury brewed. Gloria stepped forward, graciously thanked each judge, and took her shining trophy with a humble smile. Cameras flashed. The local newspaper representative scribbled notes. Nancy gave Gloria a warm hug. Even Harriet mustered a tight-lipped handshake. Standing at her table, Bertha's eyes stung with disappointment. She'd been so certain that her sabotage of Harriet and her brilliant recipe would pave her way to number one. But Gloria's unstoppable skill had triumphed yet again. Emma came up to her grandma, hugging her tightly around the waist. "I'm sorry, Grandma, your cake was so good. You should be proud," she said. "I guess pride will have to do," Bertha murmured, forcing a smile for Emma's sake. It was just a plastic trophy and a mention in a newsletter. No reason to let it hurt, yet the sting persisted. The crowd soon broke into a chatter of congratulations for Gloria, while Harriet excused herself and Nancy started handing out her leftover cupcakes. Onlookers sampled Bertha's lemon cake with genuine admiration, complimenting it as they left. But it couldn't dispel the disappointment. She began packing up her platter, slipping leftover slices into Tupperware, each movement a mechanical, forced gesture. Her illusions of unstoppable victory had shattered, and that was when Gloria approached with an understanding smile. "Bertha," she said softly, "that lemon cake was incredible. My family went back for seconds. Any chance you'd like to swap recipes one day?" Surprise flickered across Bertha's face. She'd never expected that kind of courtesy from Gloria, especially after their competitive history. "Oh," Bertha replied slowly. "I... well, sure." She was so flustered that she almost forgot to be upset. Something in Gloria's genuine warmth chipped away at Bertha's anger. Gloria put a calming hand on Bertha's shoulder. "I may have won, but that doesn't mean I can't see excellence around me. In fact, I think your lemon cake is the best thing I've tasted that uses rosemary. I'd love to learn more about how you incorporate herbs." Though the bitterness still lingered, Bertha couldn't help but appreciate the compliment. She felt a sudden wave of guilt about her sabotage. If Harriet hadn't been knocked out of the competition, maybe Nancy wouldn't have shown so strongly, and perhaps that might have forced the judges' tastes differently. Moreover, sabotaging Harriet's dessert had proven fruitless in stopping Gloria's unstoppable artistry. She realized the entire notion of sabotage was not only morally suspect, but also fairly pointless. With a small sigh, she resolved to bury her bitterness. Maybe next year she'd focus on perfecting her own technique rather than interfering with others. Emma tugged gently at Bertha's sleeve. "Grandma, can we go get ice cream to celebrate anyway?" she asked. "You did a great job, and ice cream always helps me when I'm down." Bertha knelt a bit to look into Emma's bright eyes. Although the sting of defeat still scorched her pride, she found solace in her granddaughter's unwavering support. "Yes, sweet pea," she said, patting Emma's shoulder. "I think that's a wonderful idea." Before leaving, Bertha turned to Harriet, who was crestfallen at her Ceylonized pudding fiasco. With a pang of remorse, she leaned in and said softly, "Hey, Harriet, maybe we can talk about what went wrong with your spice blend. I have a suspicion you mixed it with salt by accident." She swallowed hard at the lie, guilt gnawing at her. "I'd be happy to help you troubleshoot." Harriet furrowed her brow, exhaling heavily. "That's generous of you," she admitted, a tinge of relief in her voice. "I was so sure about my spices, maybe I mislabeled something." Bertha gave a reassuring nod, then realized Harriet was more disappointed in herself than suspicious of sabotage. Bertha's guilt sank deeper, but she kept her expression cordial. A few minutes later, the community center began to empty. Nancy offered to share leftover cupcakes with Emma, who happily accepted one with pink sprinkles. The judges chatted among themselves, still praising various entries. Gloria was the star, and deservedly so, but some folks were heard whispering that Bertha's lemon rosemary cake might have been a tie if not for the unstoppable chocolate extravaganza. Bertha savored that rumor as a small consolation prize. Outside, the sunshine felt warm on Bertha's face. She breathed in the crisp afternoon air, letting it wash away her tension. Looking down at Emma, she felt grateful for simpler joys, like an ice cream cone she could share with her granddaughter. Maybe next year, the best path would be an honest one. Sabotage was a sour ingredient, better left out of her recipes. As the two strolled down Maple Leaf Drive toward the little ice cream parlor around the corner, passersby waved and complimented Bertha for her dessert, telling her how close she'd come. She smiled graciously, reflecting on how thrilled she had been while whipping up that lemon cake in her sugar-dusted kitchen. The best part wasn't the plastic trophy or a mention in a newsletter after all, it was the moment she'd spent with Emma, teaching her how to whisk a frosting just right. It was the smell of rosemary intermingling with lemon, the satisfaction of seeing someone's eyes light up after the first bite. Sure, winning felt wonderful, but the celebration of good baking, a love shared among neighbors, meant a bit more than she used to think. She hadn't landed first place, and maybe she'd never dethrone Gloria. Still, she'd learned something new about herself that day. Competition could bring out the worst in her, or it could bring out her creativity. It all depended on which she chose to embrace. So she resolved as they walked that next year she would do things differently. She would focus on the joy in baking, the tradition, maybe even share some tips with Harriet or Nancy. If she won, or if she lost next time around, well, that was icing on the cake. Looking down at Emma, Bertha said softly, "Thank you, Sweet Pea, for always being on my team. How about a double scoop of chocolate for you and a triple scoop of vanilla for me?" Emma crinkled her nose in playful suspicion. Triple scoop? Are you sure, Grandma? That's a big treat. Bertha chuckled, hooking her arm around her granddaughter's. Why not? I think I've earned it. Then, with a wink, she added, "Besides, there's always next year and I need my energy. Don't you dare forget to remind me to practice even more." Emma giggled. "Grandma, I won't let you forget it all." They crossed the street together, heads high. Through defeat, Bertha found she could still savor the sweetness of the moment, and in doing so discovered a path to a far more rewarding victory than any trophy the neighborhood bake-off could provide.